Welcome to the Female Finance Collective, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about all things money. In last week's episode, we discussed 3 ways we self-sabotage when it comes to our finances. Today, we're going to continue this conversation by sharing 3 solutions to address those common self-sabotaging behaviors. And always remember that we're having these conversations, and this is definitely not to be construed as investment or financial advice. These are just conversations we enjoy having about money and moving your finances forward.
Let's kind of remind ourselves some of those ways that self-sabotage with our money shows up. Those would be things like avoiding budgeting, not looking at the numbers or planning at all when it comes to our finances. Let's see, stepping into like a negative identity, those types of things. I used to say this all the time. Oh, I'm terrible with money. I'm bad with math. I can't, like that's sort of self-sabotage of negative self-talk. Let's see, using credit cards excessively, relying on those to kind of close the gap, saying that you're just too busy to deal with your money or too busy to focus on it. I mean, we could keep going, right? And we talked about a lot of these in last week's episode as well. And I think they'll naturally, some other ways we self-sabotage are going to come up in this conversation. So let's dive into the first solution to addressing some of these behaviors. So I'm going to start by talking about setting up a simple budgeting system to monitor your money. If you are somebody who has never created a budget or who hasn't done it for a long time, like you don't have anything existing that you're working with, setting up something really simple and basic is a great way to get started, just paying more attention to your money. It doesn't have to be, I think when we're first getting started, it doesn't have to be some grand, really specific, crazy detailed budget, but just starting to like take some notes. Keep track of how much you're spending, even if you just want to choose like 1 or 2 categories where you think you might actually be overspending quite a bit. Like, I mean, we always go back to food because I think between groceries and dining out, and takeout, that is one where people really tend to spend more money than they often realize. So if you just want to keep a note in your phone or at the end of the month, go through your credit card and bank statement and just add up how much you spent going out to eat. I like things digitally and I have apps and all of that, but I also really like a notebook. So there are some great, very basic, straightforward budgeting notebooks that you can get where you just start writing things down and you just make time for it, at the end of every day or once a week, and just start kind of monitoring your money in some way. I think it doesn't have to be, again, some grand, huge plan, but just that basic monitoring is a really good way to kind of get an idea of what you got going on with your finances.
For sure. I used the app Mint for like 10 years and to monitor my money and to check it daily pretty much. I look at it and then that went away. I know some of our listeners probably use that app as well. And then I thought this is an opportunity to try out some other systems. And so I did that for a couple of months. I tried out some spreadsheets. I tried out some pencil and paper kind of notebooks. And I realized that was difficult for me, and I'm glad I did try it though, because there were some benefits to it. And I would say like number one is, like you said, Jen, is like categories, like understanding how much you spend in the food category or in the dining out category, even if you want to try to monitor, one part of food, or how much you spend in living expenses, things like that. And so recently I've started up with a Monarch Money app and I'm loving it. But I'm just done a lot of reflection over this kind of transition and process. And I really do monitor my money and I do have a good concept of how much I spend in those different categories, whether it's on an app or on paper or, in a spreadsheet. And so I think that is so helpful because then I don't make those choices and self-sabotage myself, because I know kind of relatively, not kind of, but I know relatively how much I need to be spending in particular categories. And I know if I have a big trip coming up or a house purchase for us for a while. It was like, okay, we got to save like everything we can right now for this house purchase. It's so expensive to not only purchase a house, but to move, right? So knowing those big categories, I could be like, my husband does the grocery shopping. Like, how can we cut back, this month on some of our grocery money, or how can we cut back on dining out? Let's not get takeout this week. We actually have a Jenga game in our the Female Finance Collective school going on right now. And there's fun challenges in it. And one that you actually just did, Jen, was like not eating out for a week. And another gal, another member of the collective, she had, her challenge was to look through her bank statements and see if she had any hidden fees. And there she found them. She couldn't believe it. She posted, she's like, oh my gosh, I was paying the bank twice, right? And after I read that, I actually went into Monarch Money and I saw that I accidentally set up my HOA to pay twice. And so not only does it help you like monitor your money, but it can help you find errors in your money system. And that's totally like self-sabotage. Like I obviously didn't check it off my list that I had set up automatic payments on the HOA, and I did it again. And if I hadn't been monitoring my money, like you said, Jen, I wouldn't have seen that. And maybe the HOA would reach out to me. I don't know, but I don't want to pay $50 twice every single month. And so that was huge, like to realize and be like, oh my gosh, I got to keep monitoring my money and checking the app or keep tracking, because it's crazy when you find things like that.
Definitely checking in on your transactions is really important, because there are a lot of scams out there, and the quicker you catch something, the better it is for you to pursue any incorrect charges with your bank or credit card company. The way I look at my finances and the way I stay on track is I just have a simple spreadsheet, and I know what categories can get me into trouble. And I just look at what I'm spending every couple of days. It only takes a few minutes for me to really, really stay on track. And the way that I automated my finances, there's two ways. One is I set up every single bill that I possibly could to be, automatically paid through either my credit card for points, or for the ones that don't, for the utilities that don't take it, I do that through my bank account. So this takes all of those bill payments off my list. Like I don't have any bills that I have to actually remember to pay. It just all happens seamlessly in the background. I do check it. So I do, look at that on my spreadsheet and just make sure that it's gone through and that it's the correct amount. And then the other way of automating my finances is I save automatically. So I figured out, I looked at my year, I figured out how much extra cash flow I have, and I put a monthly amount that goes into education savings for my kids. And then I do a retirement savings for myself. So it's already automated. I don't have to remember it. So any of those tasks that you can take off your list, it just works really, really well for reaching your goals with zero heavy lifting on your part.
And I think that's a great way to start, right? That is all of the things that we're sharing are like, even though Sybil was saying like you were like, whoa, if you listen to her and you were like, I don't already have something set up where I can go and check, that's okay. She's just talking through the process of like, once you have these systems in place, then it becomes easier to monitor. So just getting started is the biggest piece. So if you just want to set up automated bill pay, that's a great way to start kind of combating some of these self-sabotaging behaviors. Just basically take a step, right? Start tracking and paying attention to your finances and choose one thing to start and then slowly adding those on. I think that makes it so much easier.
For sure, for sure. So let's move on to the second solution to address self-sabotaging with your money. And that is to practice mindful spending to combat lifestyle inflation. So let's talk a little bit about what lifestyle inflation is first. So lifestyle inflation is basically the idea of as you make more money, you spend more money. So a lot of jobs and careers slowly over the years, you might get an inflation increase in your salary, or you might get bonuses or start making more money. And what happens is that oftentimes our lifestyle creeps along with that, and we just make more money, but we spend more money. And so we really want to combat that, because that's self-sabotaging behavior, right? That is not helping us move forward with our own finances, and especially our future selves, right? Because we want to get to a point where we can start having empathy and planning for our future selves with our money too. And so we talked about this like on the last episode, but one thing you can do to mindfully spend is use that 24-hour rule. Okay, so that the idea of, whether in person or online shopping, of putting it in your cart or doing your price comparison at the store and then not buying it in that moment, but waiting 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever it might take. Oftentimes you'll find that you really didn't want or need that thing. And it was just, I have the money, I'll spend it. It was more of an impulse spend than it needs to be. And like we just talked about, really reviewing our spending habits, right? Periodically, like we just talked about, asking ourselves, is this truly adding value to my life? In the last episode, we talked about value-based spending. What are your core values? What do you really want to spend and save and invest money for? And just asking yourself, pausing, stopping, taking a moment to ask yourself, is this really going to add value to my life? Is this going to give me joy? And make me feel happy, right? We also want to create an awareness without guilt or shame. So we don't want to shame ourselves. Oh, you just bought that impulsively. You always do that, right? That's not helpful. That actually makes us self-sabotage more. We instead want to consciously or mindfully spend and make choices. And for me, that pause is it. I was talking about this in the last episode too, of just like, do I really need this? Do I want this? Okay, I'm going to wait till tomorrow and purchase it, because I'll know better if it matches my values. And so just that idea of mindfully spending, and that idea of awareness of like, okay, I'm making more money, so I feel like I can spend more money, but actually I have this future goal over here. So am I just having lifestyle creep, or do I want to actually automate? We just talked about, as a solution, automate a little bit of savings now that I'm making more money, rather than spending that extra money. What do you guys think? Where do you see lifestyle inflation coming into place?
I think in two big things that came to mind are housing and cars. I think that we tend to think, oh, I'm making more money, I can spend this much more on a house, or I can spend this much more on a car. And those aren't necessarily bad places to put your money. But I do think that there is something to be said for thinking, here would be my max budget for a house or a monthly rent, and then let me bring it down just a little. So I don't think that some people want to stay right where they are and just keep, and that's fine, right? Like your salary goes up and you're like, this is my comfort level down here. I just want to stay at my current housing spend. That's where I'm comfortable. And other people are like, woo, my salary went up. I could live here, or I could buy this kind of a house or whatever. And I personally think, right, this isn't for everybody, that there's something to be said for finding that happy medium. So not maxing out your housing budget, but increasing where you were, because there's something to be said for like your hard work and wanting to live in a certain place or live in a certain type of home. And if you've worked really hard to increase your salary and that is something that you value, then I say go for it. But I also caution people from maxing out those things. I think that is a lifestyle inflation piece that some of us get wrapped up in. We're like, whoa, I can afford this now. This is what I'm approved for, this amount of loan for a car, or I'm approved for this amount of loan for a house. And we think we should or we have to spend that much. But the truth is, if you bring it down just a little, you're going to really create a nice buffer for yourself where you can comfortably afford what you have, but you can also continue to save money for the future. You can make improvements or changes to the house, home ownership, or even if you rent an I'm using the term nicer. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but if you're renting in a place you preferred to live, or somewhere where it's a little bit more expensive or a bigger size, you're going to need more furniture, right? To fill the bigger place. You're going to want to paint things to customize them for yourself. Like there's all these other secret expenses that we don't always think about. So I think that lifestyle inflation piece is really important to remember. Just because we can spend that much doesn't mean we should.
Right.
And it's okay to spend more while still leaving a buffer. And I think the same is true with a car, right? Cars are so tempting because you sit in some cars and you're like, oh, this car is nice. I would love it. But then you're like, you know what? It's going to cost more to maintain. So I could probably just rein it in a little and still really enjoy my car without maxing out my budget.
That's such a good point. When it comes to making those decisions, so you have your higher salary, it's making decisions and figuring out what you're spending your money on. Is that an asset that's going to grow, or is it, a car that's going to depreciate in value? And understanding what repair costs are, because this is something that comes up over and over again. So if you buy a luxury car, it will cost you a lot more to maintain that vehicle. Same thing with a house. If you upgrade a house and it's a bigger size, bigger lot, there's a lot of maintenance or repairs that come with that purchase. So definitely important to look at the big picture and look at the time, the energy, and also the maintenance that's required for those purchases. So, just kind of not just looking at the dollars, but also looking at your time and energy to do those things. I find for me the lifestyle creep category that I've had an impact in it recently has been travel. So once you stay in a nicer hotel room, or you upgrade your flight, the experience that you have is so different that it's hard to not stay in a nicer hotel room. So definitely that's been the one that I've been more mindful of recently, because then suddenly you're in a different budget category when it comes to the travel that you do.
I love a nice hotel. Just we are going somewhere for a weekend in next month, and we are going back and forth. Well, if we only stayed for 2 days, we could stay at this nicer hotel. But if we stayed for 3 days, we have gone back and forth. We have not booked anything yet because we're doing that same thing, right? Like sometimes it's nice to just go somewhere that's like a little bit nicer than your own home and just like let down and relax and enjoy that luxury for a little bit. But if you've never experienced that, you're right, Mary Lee, it's a lot easier to not. So maybe that's a caution, right? Just always stay in like those lower hotels, and you'll never know what you're missing out on, right? That's what that's like my
It's
Exactly.
value-based spending again, though, too, right?
It
Like
is.
once you stay at that nicer hotel, like question yourself, do I really value doing that every time?
That's
Do I
right.
want a shorter vacation or a longer vacation? What do I really value in this particular trip? And it might not be the same answer in the next trip, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm from Europe and I used to always do coach flights, for my entire life. And then I upgraded one year and had the lay down bed. And I was like, how do I ever do a vacation in a coach seat again? Like it's a completely different experience, but obviously comes with a lot more money. So, it's being mindful of where money goes. So I was going to share the third solution to, a self-sabotaging financial behavior. And one of the behaviors is just kind of feeling frozen or stuck and not wanting to kind of take the first step forward. And the best solution for that is to break down your financial management or your financial goals into smaller, more manageable tasks. So this helps so that you don't get too overwhelmed and it's not overly time consuming. So if you're just getting started, you haven't really looked at your finances in a while, and you don't know where you stand, one of the ways I approach this is looking at different categories of our finances and just taking the steps to get clear on in those categories. So one of them is income. So just having a look and getting a realistic view of what your income is. So the different sources of income. So if you receive a salary, it's understanding, do you receive the same amount each month? Are there different months where you receive more or less income? Do you usually receive a tax refund or any government benefits? So just taking inventory and just making a list of what your income is each month and each year. The other area is having a look at your debts. So just taking a list, figuring out what various debts you have. So your credit cards, any consumer loans, mortgages. Sometimes people lose track, and they're able to find this information if they look at a credit report. So if you've completely lost track, you don't really know what types of debts you have, figuring those out, understanding what your monthly payments are and your interest rate. Then look at your savings. And sometimes this surprises people. When they look at their pay stubs, if they're doing a retirement plan through their employer, it's kind of cool to see how much that can be every year. And it's money that you don't necessarily feel in your budget, but it is savings that you're setting aside. So getting an understanding of what you are currently saving. And then the tougher one is expenses. So just getting a realistic view of what you spend each month. Utilities and things like mortgage or rent, those are easier to find because they're around the same each month. It's the day-to-day spending, so getting kind of clear on what you spend in each different area of your life, that is a little bit trickier. But you can do these different categories on different days, or however you want to kind of approach your finances. But just getting started with understanding where you stand. And then even for goals, when people have big goals like paying down debt, it's great to break it up into smaller chunks. So, celebrating and setting a milestone of $1,000, like just paying off $1,000 extra of debt, that is a big milestone, a big celebration, and continuing with that habit so that it makes a big goal a lot easier to digest and keeps you motivated to make progress.
I
Absolutely
think
love the idea of celebrating, Marilee. Like I've tried to do that more and more and just remind myself to do it, because sometimes I'll do it and it's like, yay, I'm celebrating this milestone, this financial milestone, but then I forget to do the next one. So if you can find people to celebrate with, that's really a great strategy, and just share your successes, and people will ask questions. That's what we're all about here at the Female Finance Collective, is like having these conversations about money, right? So if you're sharing some celebrations, even if it's a little thing like finding $50 that you were paying twice, like I just found, by sharing that with my husband, you guys, things like that. It motivates me to keep tracking my expenses, keep monitoring my money, right? And motivation is like the number one underrated. I don't know. We don't think about motivation enough. But we need to feel motivated. Managing your money is work. There's nobody that's going to tell you different. So if you feel motivated to do it, that helps a lot, right? And celebrating is one way to stay motivated and meeting those little goals that you set for yourself. That's awesome.
And I think it's so much, especially if you're just getting started and you are like nervous or hesitant, or you're scared to like see the reality of like how much debt you actually have or any of that. I think that your tip of just breaking it down into small pieces and taking on one thing at a time makes it feel so much more manageable. I know for me, when I knew not like was kind of in the dark, I didn't want to know all the answers. I didn't want to do the math on how long it was going to take me to pay my debt off. Like it was like less scary, even though it was stressful, it was like less scary than knowing for whatever reason. But I do think, You know, we talk about this sometimes when when we're like sick. Do you guys know we have something wrong and we just wish we knew what it was, because the not knowing part is really stressful. And if we just had the answer, we would feel better because we'd know how to make a plan. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. What Mary Lee was sharing is, you know, if you just get the information in front of you, just little bits of it at a time, just slowly over time, gather the information. It will ultimately be less stressful to know where you are and then to be able to create a plan, whether your plan is, I'm just going to do one thing at a time, right? One little thing, take one step. That will make it less stressful than not knowing at all. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. It really does feel better to know than it does to keep yourself in the dark.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for listening today. Be sure to like and follow our podcast. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at the Female Finance Collective. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your questions, your topic ideas, and we look forward to chatting next week.